Dan, you have done work on taxes.
Yep.
What did you take of substance from last night's debate?
Well, it's interesting, Brendan, because you're showing us the first debate, what they call the kiddie table debate. And I was fascinated that there was not as much talk about taxes on the grown-up stage last night. We talked about a lot of other issues and substantive issues, but there was a missing tax, economy, wage issue. But when you start to look at the tax issue that's happening in the Republican debate, Donald Trump put carried interest, this ability to tax both real estate and hedge fund managers at a lower tax rate equivalent to capital gains on the table. And that's always been a Democratic talking point. And so now it's being incorporated into the Republican debate. A number of Republicans are saying they will close that loophole. But there is a very important caveat that it has to be as part of comprehensive tax reform, which is lowering capital gains and income tax rates overall. And that's been hard to come by in previous years itself.
You know,
so
Dan,
it may be much about nothing, but this is about a $1 billion tax break they're talking about in about $3 trillion of tax revenue being collected. I'm
so
sorry,
Dan,
Bonnie,
in the main debate, it was almost 3 hours, and I waited and waited and waited until almost the very end, where we got a tiny discussion about economic issues. What are we to deduce from that? Is the economy not America's number one sort of concern still?
Well, no, I think there's too many people on stage. There's 16, there's 11 people on stage. They're all trying to fight with each other. You also didn't see the Republicans contrast themselves with Democrats last night. And I think some of the questions that were posed by the anchor, and not to say that he did a bad job, were less relevant than what your point is. And that is that the economy and that government corruption, those are the two big issues in the Republican primary voters. And I just don't think that they got enough airing on that yesterday. That being said, this is an extremely substantive debate that's happening in the Republican Party. This is a much different field today than it was 4 years ago. And I think as some of these candidates start to get out and the field narrows, this debate is only going to strengthen as we go over time. And Vonnie, one final point on this. Most of the race does not break until you get to November and December. Last night was really the beginning of the Republican race. A lot of people saw Carly for the very first time, and I think that there's more to come over the next few months.
Dan, real quick, in the undercard debate, Rick Santorum said no Republicans ever talk about employees. They only talk about employers. When does that point filter up into the top 10?
Well, I think that that's coming. And look, that's the best point that Rick Santorum's made this campaign or the previous campaign 4 years ago. And I do think that Republicans do need to continue to push small businesses. But at the end of the day, Donald Trump has tapped into something. Ben Carson has tapped into something. Carly Fiona has tapped into something because they're from outside the Beltway. And it's that Americans know that growth is not where it should be.
Okay, Dan, I got to jump in here.
And I think it's coming.
I would say Carly Fiorina has tapped into something. Dan Clifton at Strategas Research.